let's take a look at.
Yeah.
Remember, this is in support of my argument that the Bible does condone slavery. So, like I said, I'm not using just Exodus 21. So let's go to another part of the Bible. Let's go to Ephesians. We're going to go to Ephesians 6, verse 5 through 8. And I'm just going to read it along. I'm not going to... Ephesians, E-P-H-E-S-I-A.
Which verse is this?
Ephesians 6.
No, I don't want to do Ephesians. No, I only want to stay on Exodus. Because I want to stay focused on my videos and what was said on with my videos, because Ephesians, I've not come to that part yet.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are. I am in Pokhara, Nepal. Okay, so I am live. I'm in a cafe here in Pokhara. It's called King's Cafe, and it is extremely noisy because I am not sitting in my usual seat, because there's already somebody there, and then there's a public road here, so cars are going up and down, lorries, motorbikes, and when they turn on the blender it makes a lot of noise. But I have no other choice, because it's the only place where I can get, that's the blender, where I can get good Wi-Fi.
Everybody, this is Jamal. So Jamal, can you just please explain to everybody who you are and what you do and how you know me?
Yes, my name is Jamal, and I was born and raised in the United States, Philadelphia. Did a lot of traveling and stuff. Joined the military in my late adulthood. Served 17 years in the United States Air Force. I am currently retired, and I worked as a contractor for operation and maintenance for unmanned aircraft. And I met Celeste during, I think, one of her videos, I think featuring Matt Dillahunty, on the topic of, I think, whether it was slavery or something was immoral. And we kind of had a conversation about that. And we decided to, after the conversation, we decided to eventually do this podcast so that we can express our individual views on that topic.
Okay, thanks, Jamal. So just so people also know, I did ask a lot of people who were talking to me. Everybody chickened out. The others were just too rude for me to even consider talking to them, because I value myself. So people are rude to me. You sayonara, have a good life. Okay, but Jamal is also very kind, well-spoken. So, okay, Jamal, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. This is the one that people ask me to ask you first. What are your religious beliefs, if you have any?
Okay, sorry? Yeah, I was going to get into some of that during the discussion, but yes, since you're asking the question, I was born and raised in Christianity. Some people say indoctrinated, but it comes from a very religious background as a Baptist Christian. I've studied Christianity all my life. In fact, at 9 years old, I picked up a Bible for the first time and started reading it from front to back. I was into comic books and everything else, and all the adults around me found it fascinating that I was able to pick up the Bible and read it and interpret it. And of course, I had the understanding of a 9-year-old at the time. But yeah, that's pretty much my background with Christianity up until about my, I want to say, mid-30s. To where I started questioning those views, and then I wound up changing my beliefs.
So now, are you agnostic, atheist, pantheist? What are you now, or just free thinker?
Yeah, I would consider myself. Well, I went through a few stages during my deconversion. So during my deconversion from Christianity, I had become what you would call an agnostic atheist. As basically says, you don't know if there is a God, but you don't believe that there is. So I went through that phase, and I can kind of say that I still kind of linger within that. It just depends on the God that's described in in that God's attributes, and whether I can either plausibly deny that God exists, or say, hey, I ultimately just don't know if that God exists. But I'm somewhere. It just depends on the God that's proposed and how I feel towards it.
Okay, right. So the next question is, so to you, is the Bible a fairy tale, or would you say it is legitimate literature?
Well, I mean, I would say that's sort of a complicated question. I can say I don't believe many of the things that are in the Bible. However, there is some historical value in those things that are written in the Bible, because it is a part of history, in the basic fact that it is written, it was written, whether it was a story or not. I think a fairy tale may be a stretch, but like I said, I don't believe that many of those things actually happened. But however, storytelling and everything was a prominent part of our history in early humanity. So, not a definite answer to the question.
Yeah. So basically, it's not a fairy tale. It's just that it's not literal.
And that's also complicated as well, because some things in the Bible can be literal, some things are not literal. It's all open to interpretation. So that's another complication of not only Christianity but many religions.
Okay. So last two. Okay. So because you didn't say no to number 2, because if you did say no, it would be a bit complicated for us to continue our conversation, because like, to me, I'm not into fairy tales. So if you were going to say it's just plain straightforward fairy tale, then it would have been like, okay, thank you for speaking to you. Because I'm an adult, I'm not really interested in fairy tales. I've been there, done that when I was a young girl. I've grown out of fairy tales. I'm not interested in Harry Potter or Narnia or any of that. I don't even watch Mission Impossible, because it's a fairy tale. It's not the truth. Okay, so because you're agnostic, so this is a bit difficult. If you were just atheist, but let me ask and just hear what you would say. Who do you think wrote the Bible? Since you don't think it's a fairy tale, acknowledge that.
Well, I'll clarify the previous. I am atheist to all proposed God's propositions. It just depends on what that proposition is as to whether or not I can definitely say that this God does not exist, or I can say that this God probably exists, or I just don't know. But generally, yeah, I would say I'm a soft atheist. And could you repeat the question again? I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah. So who do you think wrote the Bible?
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, who do I think wrote the Bible? I think I got the question. Who do I think wrote the Bible? Well, the honest answer to that would be I do not know. However, there are some people, some names that may come up on who may have wrote the Bible. But then again, if we know the history of the Bible, it's a collection of 66 books. It was actually quite more than 66 books before. There were 14 books removed called the Apocrypha. So the Bible is a compilation of a lot of different authors and works of different people throughout history as a compilation to create the Bible. So that is a very complicated question in itself. So I don't think there's a definite who, but throughout history, there were definitely people who contributed to the works of the Bible, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. Okay, so let's see so let's go back to why we are here. So you tell me what you think about Exodus 21, especially the parts pertaining to slavery, because I said in my video that the Bible does not condone, in my video that the Bible does not condone slavery. So I know you have a different opinion or perspective or interpretation. So can you please tell us about that?
Yes, ma'am. And please forgive me if I talk a lot here and interrupt me if you need to clarify anything.
No, I'm not
try to do my best.
Going to interrupt at all.
So for those who are listening and watching, I'd like to be as clear as possible on my goal here. So my goal here isn't to necessarily convince people otherwise of what they believe. It's just to provide another introspect of how things are interpreted in the Bible, and specifically in regards to slavery, since this is the topic. So at least if you guys can look at this and evaluate the information that I'm going to give, and at the end of the day, conclude that the Bible does condone slavery, or that it can be interpreted that way. That's all you should take away from this. And I'll provide, I'll actually use the Bible and verses from the Bible, and you can follow along with some of the things that I have here. But to begin, I'd like to start with a syllogism to help me prove my case here, or to help support my argument. So my syllogism would be that slavery was a common practice in human history. And then my next premise of that syllogism would be, so I'd like to start with the syllogism, which is a deductive argument that usually consists of two premises and a conclusion. So my first premise was that slavery was a common practice in human history. That's something that we can know and accept. Two, the Christian Bible illustrates regulation and laws that govern the acquisition, procurement, and treatment of slaves. And then my conclusion is that therefore the Bible condones slavery. So we'll go step by step in a second, and we'll see how it can be interpreted that the Bible does in fact condone slavery. Next, I'd also like to start with defining a few words here. So the first word would be the word condone, which is a verb. So condone means to accept, to allow, behavior that is considered morally wrong or offensive in some cases, to continue, to allow that behavior to continue. So to accept and to allow it to continue is condonement of that behavior. The second definition of condone would be to approve or sanction something, especially with reluctance. The next word, of course, would be sanction, which is also a verb. And this means to give official permission or approval of an action. The next word from the Cambridge Dictionary, those first two came from Oxford. This one's from Cambridge definition of the word allow, is to let someone do something or to let something happen. So if you let someone do something, or you let something happen, then that means you allow that to happen. The next word, my fourth word would be permit, which is also a verb. And that means to give authorization or consent to someone or something for them to do something. So if you give authorization or consent, then you permit them to be able to do that action. And my last and final word would be to govern, which is also a verb. And this means to conduct the policy, actions, affairs of a state, organization, or people. All right, so when you govern a policy or something like that, that which concerns people in their state of affairs, you're governing that acquisition. All right, so now to get into what we're actually here to talk about, which is, does the Bible in Exodus 21 condone slavery? So we'll start with Exodus 21, but there are actually several verses in the Bible that supports this argument from my end. But if you have, for those who are listening, I'm not necessarily sure about you, Celeste, if you brought a Bible with you. If not, I will read along, and we will start with Exodus 21. Can you give me a moment? I have to move some screens around here. Sorry, I can't share these with you. But I'm actually going to go to Exodus 21, and we'll go to verse 2. So Exodus 21, verse 2, and I am using the New American Standard Bible version. I'm using BibleGateway.com. This is an online Bible here, and it has several different iterations and versions of the Bible here that you can use. I will be using the NASB and the NIV version just for easy English. So to begin with Exodus 21, verse 2, it says, "If you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve for 6 years, but on the 7th he shall leave as a free man without payment to you." Now this verse is specific rules for Hebrew slaves. And I know there was some confusion, or not necessarily confusion. People like to bring up indentured servitude, which is a thing in the Bible, but indentured servitude was regulated for specific peoples. So my intent here is to describe how certain forms of slavery was intended for certain peoples, uh, and there are certain conditions and rules given on how to govern those people. So in this verse, it clearly says, if you buy a Hebrew slave, it gives the directions on and how long that slave can serve, and when you can set that slave free. This is only specific for Hebrew slaves. Regular slaves didn't have this entitlement. They didn't have this rule set upon them. Those people could be enslaved forever, and there were certain ways that they enabled this to happen, which I'll get into later. But let's get into the third verse. If he comes alone, he shall leave alone. If he is the husband of a wife, then his wife shall leave with him. And again, these are rules just for Hebrew people. In the fourth verse, if his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall belong to her master, and he shall leave alone, meaning she wasn't allowed to leave. She will remain a slave forever, or remain her master's property indefinitely. But here was another way in verse 5, which shows how this person can be tricked into, the male slave can be tricked into remaining a slave indefinitely, just as his wife would. So in verse 5 it says, but if the slave plainly says, I love my masters, my wife, and my children, if he so happened to have had a wife and children during slavery, I will not leave as a free man. Verse 6 continues to say, then his master shall bring him to God, and he shall bring him to the door of the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear through with an awl, and then that would signify that he would serve his master indefinitely or permanently, just as the wife and child would. But remember, that wife and child wasn't granted their freedom after 6 or 7 years. They will automatically remain a slave indefinitely, whereas the Hebrew male would have a chance to stay, only if he wanted to stay, to remain with his wife and children, or if he loved his master. So here we can very clearly see that there were rules given that allow, permit conditions of slavery. I'd also like to people to be very clear in understanding that I do not believe that the Bible created, or God in the Bible created slavery, but the Exodus explains how God was given the laws to the people on how to treat one another during these troubling times, during slavery. Another problem that I have is that if God of the Bible can be so specific on these laws of slavery, he could also be specific in saying that one person, or should be unlawful for one person to be able to own another. There shouldn't be rules given for that, but in this instance, there are, and there are many, many examples. So that I don't take up too much time, I'm going to continue through with a couple of more examples here. So very quickly, and before we get into the Q&A, I'm going to give some other verses before we actually get further into Exodus. So for those who have a Bible, and you, Celeste, if you will, I'm going to give you some other verses to support my case, and then we can return to Exodus as time permits, because I know I think I had 30 minutes to do this with you, and right now I don't seem to be bothered much right now.
Yeah,
so if we can extend past. Let's take a look at.
Yeah.
Remember, this is in support of my argument that the Bible does condone slavery. So, like I said, I'm not using just Exodus 21. So let's go to another part of the Bible. Let's go to Ephesians. We're going to go to Ephesians 6, verse 5 through 8. And I'm just going to read it along. I'm not going to. Ephesians, E-P-H-E-S-I-A.
Which verse is this?
Ephesians 6.
No, I don't want to do Ephesians. No, I only want to stay on Exodus. Because I want to stay focused on my videos and what was said with my videos, because Ephesians, I've not come to that part yet. That will be in the continuation.
I understand. I'm just what I'm doing is giving some brief insight to support my argument, which is the Bible condones slavery. And So I'll just give a few. Is it okay if I
Yeah,
just
but I
give a
want to
few
stay
short verses?
within Exodus.
You would like to say in Exodus?
No, you have to
Okay.
stay in Exodus, because once we get into the others, it's going to get very complicated. Yeah, I think just stay in
Okay.
Exodus,
Awesome.
because this was my
Okay.
whole
So
thing
I'll
was
continue
about
along.
Exodus.
I'll continue along in Exodus. So I'll continue along in Exodus until we get to Exodus 21, and then we'll cut it short. But I do have many other verses that support my argument, but we'll save that for another day. Gotcha. All right, so let's move on to let's go to Exodus 7. So we're just going to continue along until we get to Exodus 21. We'll move on until we get to the Exodus 21 verses 20 through 21. So I'll just pick a few here and make it as short as possible. So Exodus 7. Now, if a man steals, or if a man sells his daughter as a female slave, she is not to go free as the male slaves do, which I described earlier. This explicitly given rules for male and female slaves. And again, keep in mind that there's a different set of rules for Hebrew slaves other than the slaves that are gathered around you. In verse 8, if she is displeasing to the eyes of her master who designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He does not have authority to sell her to foreign people because of his unfairness to her. Let me see. Let's go on to something that actually solidifies more of my case here.
Yeah, I think if we stick ones that I covered, because the ones that I noticed that had panties up in knots was the Exodus. I think it was 2021, the one about the beating.
Let's skip straight to that.
Verse 20 and verse 21.
Yeah,
those two.
Yes, let's skip straight to that. Yeah, let's skip straight to that, and then we'll get into Q&A or wherever you want to leave the rest of the engagement. Okay, so let's go to verse 20.
Exodus 20.
Let's go straight to
Exodus 20 they were okay with. 20 was okay.
Okay.
21.
Okay, I'm gonna read the whole thing and then we'll talk about it.
Oh.
So Exodus 20.
Okay.
Exodus 20, and if someone strikes his male or female slave with a rod, and the slave dies at his hand, he shall be punished. Verse 21, if however the slave survives a day or two, no vengeance shall be taken, for the slave is his property. I think this is a big topic of when we talked on the video, when this was said in the video. But as I stated in the beginning of Exodus, it does support slavery. It condones it. It gives regulation for it and everything else. I guess the contention here in verse 20 was whether if someone strikes his male or female slave with a rod and that slave dies, to me that's pretty much obvious. If you're under any kind of condition to where someone can take a rod to you and beat you to the point of you needing a break or two or having to wait a day or two to recover from it, the fact that you potentially could die from it, and if not, nothing happens to the owner. These are really bad, disagreeable conditions for anybody to live in, regardless of the time or the context thereof. I don't think there's much else to say about that. It says it explicit. It's very clear to me. It says if someone strikes his slave, his male or female slave with a rod, and the slave dies at his hand, he shall be punishment. I think some people were believing this to be a deterrent for someone to not beat their slave, and I say that a deterrent is not enough. I think that, again, I'll go back to the argument that if a god can make very specific demands and rules, stuff like to not wear mixed fabrics or not eat pork, he can also be very specific into not having one person be an owner of another human being, instead of coming up with, well, if a master beats his slave, and as long as he gets up within a day or two, then nothing will happen to the owner. I don't think even for that time, we can look back at that time and say these were unfavorable conditions for anybody to live in, regardless of the context of why it happened. My argument here is not to explain or argue why it happened or why it was allowed. My argument is that the Bible does condone this type of behavior. I'm not saying that, like I said earlier, I'm not saying that the Bible created slavery or anything like that. From my histories and studies, it says that, God found his people in this condition, and he gave the law to help these people live to the best of their means. Now, there's all sorts of verses that I can give to support my case much further and solidify it, but I guess we wanted to keep it simple here and stop here at 20 and 21. So Celeste, if there's anything else you want to add, or if we want to question and do it back and forth, we can do that.
The only other verse that I did, because I do little exercises when I do these things on YouTube. The other verse I put in was Mark 12 verse 31, which is the golden rule verse, which is love your neighbor as yourself.
It says, the second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There's no commandment greater than these. Okay. And you want to know whether I had some insight on it? Sorry, I have to hit the light again.
Yeah, because I added that to the argument of treatment of human beings in 2023. Because how we normally link things like that, like Exodus 21, but I'll do that when I do my 15 minutes. Exodus 21, we always link that with what was finally said by God about everything about living, about laws, about regulations, is that it comes down to love God and then love thy neighbor as thyself. And this one was the verse that only one person actually spoke to me about this verse. Everybody was busy with the smiting, the hitting, the beating. Only one person spoke to me about that. So what do you think about that?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so here's what we have going on here. This is called a what a lot of atheists and non-believers they call this. I'm just straight out say they call it cherry picking. You'll find one verse that they agree with, and then you'll find another verse that supports your argument. And you can do that with anything throughout the Bible. You can find one saying in the Bible somewhere else in the Old Testament, and you can point to something in the New Testament to support any argument that you want to make. So, and another thing that's happening here is a false correlation. We're correlating the rules that in Exodus for slavery with the treatment of what Marcus, that verse in Mark is given a blanket statement for treatment of all people. Which is contradictory to some of the laws that were given, which were very specific, as I mentioned before. If God can give very specific laws and rules for not wearing mixed fabrics, not eating shellfish, for when a person can receive punishment for beating another person, it kind of contradicts, it kind of cancels out on, from one hand, giving instructions for this thing and then saying, well, you all must love all people. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand the good statement. Like I said, I've studied the Bible a lot for over 30 years. So I understand what it's saying. But I guess my answer to that is it has nothing to do with Exodus 21 overall, or at least specifically when dealing with Exodus 21 and things that says, it has nothing specifically to do with that. But I do get the overall message. But it is not a good counter to what the condonement, the sanction, the allowment, the permission, and the government of slavery in Exodus 21.
Okay. So anything else? Because then I will just summarize my one. Finished?
Yeah,
anything else?
I have tons of other verses, but I guess I don't know if you wanted me to quickly go over a few of them or to just end it on Exodus 21. To keep it there, but I do have other verses that are from the Bible.
I'm only interested in Exodus 21. Yeah, yes, only Exodus 21.
Okay, let me see if there's anything else that I should cover.
Okay.
Let's see, 26. There's some other stuff in here. Let's go down to verse 26 next. Exodus 21, verse 26. And if someone strikes the eye.
Specifically talk about.
Oh, just 21. Is it just verse 20 and 21, or are we discussing slavery as a whole?
No, because I wanted to specifically talk about You see, because what happened is in the video that I spoke with you,
Yes.
people were only, you know, Exodus 1 has many verses. People were only concerned with the beating part. They totally did not mention any of the other things. And this is what I find is normally the case when people talk about slavery. And the other thing is also because people like to equate biblical slavery with the transatlantic slavery. It's your history, it's not my history. I'm South African, we were never slaves. What is that? It's called
you're talking about chattel slavery?
Yeah, that thing.
Chattel slavery?
But that one is covered in, and you know, us as slavery is a very sensitive issue. We don't talk about it in Africa because Africans are the ones who are selling their own people. So it's like,
yes,
when nobody, we never sit together, and slavery never comes up because, especially for those people, not my country, the other African countries, to them it was something that happened. We needed to survive. That's what we did. Move on. So it's very, I don't want to get touchy because, you know, I'm South African. There's a lot of Africans that watch my channel. I don't want to get everyone's panties up in a knot over something that to us we do not discuss. But this is in Exodus 21:16. It does say here, I'm using the new King James Version. It says, and he that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. So whatever happened to you guys, that we know definitely a no in God's eyes. It is stated here in 16. In Exodus 21:16, because you cannot steal a man, you cannot sell him. Okay, and the fact that it uses the word man means that a slave is a human being. It's not, slave is just the word. Anyway, so
you are correct. You are correct.
Segment now.
You are correct. Okay. In verse 16, it does cover man stealing, which is a separate offense. Man stealing is a separate offense.
Because some people did try to bring it up.
Conquering another nation. Man stealing is a completely different offense. It's a completely different offense.
Yeah,
it's
that
not
should not even be discussed when we're discussing the Bible. That is, and especially in Africa, we never discuss that. I've visited from Mauritania down to South Africa. I traveled by car, and from Sudan down to South Africa as well. Every African I've been to, it is not discussed. It is something that I know friends whose parents were slave traders in Tanzania. They took their own family members and gave them to be put on the ships and taken to the US. I know people in Ghana, but this is just, we don't talk about it because this is their life. This is what they needed to do to survive. I'm not getting involved in that because, like I say, a lot of them will be watching my video, and then you see how people on Facebook can just go crazy. Okay, so let me get into, mine will be very short because mine is more, thank you so much for that, because I think people can always learn. You know, we're all learning. Everyone has different points of views. Everybody interprets things differently. Everybody has different perspectives. In today's world, I know what's right and what's wrong. In general, I know what's right for me. So read the Bible, it is for me. So that's why I never care about homosexuality, because I do not indulge in those sins. I don't care, read about murder, because I read about things that pertains to my life. So that is why when you say cherry picking, it's true. We do cherry pick, because you would cherry pick according to what concerns you. Like married, so maybe if I'm attracted to somebody else's husband, I would cherry pick all the verses that has got to do with adultery, because it pertains to my life. So it is cherry picking, for sure. First of all, just so people know, I am not a Christian. I am a Taoist. I am a Christ Taoist. Taoist means I follow the path of Christ. I am totally against Christianity because it's a man-made religion. I am against any organized man-made religions. I don't follow any of that stuff. So, saying that. So let me start. Okay, I have to read. Okay, I still stand in my original video, which was the one where I responded to what Matt Dillahunty was saying about Exodus 21, and I still stand by the fact that it does not condone slavery. You gave a very beautiful definition of the word condone, but I still stand by that it does not condone slavery. Okay, what it does, it introduces indentured servitude, because an indentured servant is not like a slave, because a slave has no rights. So the fact that there was rules and regulations means that these people who these rules and regulations were written for were seen as human beings, not as a thing, as a property. Okay, this is just okay. Slaves have no rights whatsoever, since they are not regarded as human beings but as property. So these rules regulates it for the people of those times and in that place. So you agreed with me about that? It's for those people, because it said they're Hebrew, and those and that time. I don't know how many BC. I am not a Hebrew. It does not pertain to me. That's why I say I cherry pick. It's got nothing to do with my life. It says that if you have a Hebrew slave or Hebrew servant, I will never have a Hebrew servant, never. So that when I see that, I page. Okay. So, but these regulations are a moral pathway to the human rights that we enjoy today, because those days they did not have human rights regulations. This was like in this region, because the Chinese will argue that they had before the Taoists, Confucius, all these people they had, but in this region, this is the first time that they actually had this pathway to human rights that we have today. And for me, this is based in Taoism, because I'm a Taoist, because Tao is path and way, and the Tao meets people where they are and not where you want them to be. Okay, so because, like I say, because I'm a Taoist, when I see these rules, it is had to be like that for those people, because that on the path, that is where they were. As they progress along the path, more rules will come in and more will be extracted, because as you evolve towards enlightenment, the path becomes smoother and sometimes more tricky, depends. Okay, right. So with Mark 12:31, which means which is the love your neighbor as yourself, for me it means Jesus came and he did not say that this is wrong. What he did was he fulfilled these same regulations, but he completed it by adding this new thing and transcended it, which means it is taken out of the book. Now you, why it transcends, you have to now choose. You have to now be the regulator, not him anymore. It's there. You have to do the right thing. So this is what it transcends, because again, when you are a self-actualized person or enlightened person, you would know how to read what is in writing and then how to transcend it, because the path is always about transcendence and enlightenment. Okay. Okay, and why I say this is because the image and character of Jesus Christ is, his character is I am, which means he is God for me. For some other people, you can do whatever you want. God to me just means he is the pinnacle of my moral structure. For some people, the pinnacle of their moral structure is Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Dillahunty, Kim Kardashian. It doesn't matter. The pinnacle of my moral structure is Jesus Christ. So to me, that is God. Okay, for some people, it's even dogs. So he is I am, which means he is God. So he is that person, that entity who gave these regulations. He is also that entity who fulfilled it, completed it, and transcended it. Because also he is a teacher, which means as a teacher, you don't spoon feed. You give something, you give guidance, and then you let the student expand on it. So you tell them, you can, if you beat your slave, it doesn't say you must, it says if you beat your slave and this will happen. So why it transcends is because you read that, you look at it, and then you, the enlightened person, think for yourself, do I want to put myself in a position where I am not sure how, to what extent I am injuring this person, because at the end of the day, it's going to come back to me. So it's self-reflection. But this is the way of the Tao, okay? This is not Christianity, or it's just the way of the Tao, okay? And the Tao is the way. He's also a preacher, which means he says things, he preaches things, you listen, you complete it, and you transcend it. He's also the savior for me, savior, which means when I have all these, when I'm on the path, it will take me to enlightenment, and when I have reached enlightenment, I will be saved. I'm still on the path, very far from enlightenment, getting there. Okay, so I also stand with my video 1, where I say that those who believe the Bible is a fairy tale, and God is just some sky daddy with a big beard up there. Well, some of us think it's Morgan Freeman, which to me makes more sense. But anyway, of course, I'm not even going to talk to you, because we are vibrating on different frequencies. You are not, you following a different path, I'm following the path of enlightenment. But of course, for others who still find biblical scripture interesting, not even from a spiritual point of view, but just literature, philosophy, whatever, this is fine, because you might be seeking. Maybe one day you'll find, you might be knocking, one day you will be answered, because I was an atheist, so I know that's what happened to me. Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens brought me back to God, because they kept saying these things, so I kept looking in the Bible to make sure that to confirm what they're saying, and in the end, I went a different route. So you see, without knowing, I was knocking, and the door opened. Okay, and then also video 3, I stand by this video, but I want to add about Exodus 20:21, which is the beating, because I've been talking to a few people and just thinking for myself. The thing about the beating and after 2 days recovery is a punishment for the slave and the slave owner. A punishment for this, because slaves also do things wrong. Then why they say 2 days, someone told me, because even just swelling, bruising, bleeding of injury, if it does not heal within 2 days, you will be, the owner will be killed. So of course it's very tricky to and you have to, it must be by a rod. And then my friend in Ghana told me that in Ghana they do actually have indentured servitude, and they follow the biblical scripture, the regulations exactly, even the beating part. And what happens with this is, if this indentured servant does something wrong, they have a choice to, let's say they, like my friend, not my friend, this person I was talking to, the servant killed their dog. So they can take the servant, because it's an indentured servant, and take them to the police, and then there'll be a case, and the person will probably get 6 months to 1 year imprisonment. Or the prisoner, the servant can choose to follow the biblical scripture, which is you can get beaten. So what do? They beat on the hand 4 strokes, because they know if they beat on the hand does not really bruise, bleed, swell. And 4 strokes, they normally give between 1 and 6 is the most, because they know between 1 and 6 within 2 days it can heal. So that is how they do it in modern, but this is in Ghana. So they seem to have worked it out. They seem to be fine with it. Nobody's complaining. So it's not for me to judge my Ghanaian friends. You do as you do. You do you, I do me. But they are really following this Exodus, and they, like I say, they seem to be killed indentured servant, nothing. Okay, because I want to keep this so that, you know, we are from all over the world, we're from different countries, different cultures, we see things differently. So I need to try to not get anyone's panties in a knot. Okay. Why this law is about beating in the 2 days is because it makes provision for self-defense. because this protects the slave owner, because slave can also hurt the owner, and the owner has to retaliate. He cannot just let the slave beat him up. And also in defense of another, and also it is unintentional. It's again, it's, what do they call it in this law? It's mitigating circumstances. So anyway, this is what was told to me recently. Okay, and then, oh, I forgot to do the last one. The last one would be that I also stand by what I say in my last video, which is, for me personally, because like you said, we cherry pick. I do not cherry pick the slavery laws. That's why I said Dillahunty and Jordan Peterson, who are these great intellectuals. I don't know why they keep harping on these things when in 2023 we have so much slavery going on. The Sound of Freedom, this new movie, has exposed some of it. Anyone who's eating chocolates now on our handphones and laptops, people spray painting their cars, wearing all this bling bling makeup, we are all supporting and condoning slavery, because these products are all being made by slaves. And I'd rather, my thing is not even about slavery, my thing is I'd rather have people like Jordan B Peterson with such a big platform. I don't know about Mac, how big his platform, but especially Jordan B Peterson, to focus on these things. Let the people in the Bible die off. Please focus on what is happening now to our people now, especially in Africa. Nobody cares about these people. If people could care, all those people who are hating on me in the comments, if you all could care more about those people than about those few Jews that died many years ago, and that's not being anti-Semitic, it's just I would be in a better place. So that's just where I stand with this whole thing.
Well, there's a lot that you said there, and there's a lot that I could disagree with. I didn't want to jump in because it's not a back and forth. You gave me time to talk, and of course it's your platform, so I didn't want to jump in and say anything. But there's a lot that I would disagree with, that I could argue for and against in what you said. But that, I guess we can say that for another day, because we kind of went off of topic from what my argument was. I was just sticking with that slavery does is kind of condoned by the Bible, out of the Bible. But yeah, you did bring up a lot of issues. I just don't have time to get into all of it. And like I said, it's not a back and forth. So maybe we can do a back and forth one time with another person as a mediator, or we can get another person on, and then we can go back and forth on topics. So I just wanted to say, because I remember when we talked online, I had trouble with following and staying on task with what your actual goal was. So you kind of mixed a lot of things together that all need to be discussed and talked about with the Taoism and everything else, because people will find it kind of difficult to understand with mixing the Taoism and then a Taoist having an opinion about Christianity for someone who hasn't read the whole Bible. But all of us as people can read and interpret different types of things and have an opinion. So there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with learning, like you said, teaching and learning so that we all can have an understanding. It's just that when we have different, conclusions, we come up with a different conclusion by reading the same material, then we have a problem. And if we're trying to equate another teaching with another and trying to figure out, mitigate it, try to find a middle ground, it's kind of hard to do, especially when a lot of religious views are opposing views. They don't have the same views throughout the whole dogma, throughout the whole teaching. At some point, a Muslim person will have something wrong with the Christian doctrine and vice versa. Even Catholics and Christians have disagreements. Even within Christianity, there are 48,000 denominations, and these numbers are reported by Christian authorities and scholars. There's 48,000 denominations. There it is. Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying. Sorry, just.
Yeah, I heard it. Yeah, so even within Christianity, there's 48,000 denominations, if not more. More and more are added every year, and these numbers are reported by Christian authorities and scholars. 16,000 in the United States alone, and then worldwide, there's everywhere else. There's different different teachings, different beliefs within beliefs, uh, and it's hard to kind of mitigate and try to have people understand on one common ground. You would expect all Christians to kind of band together, and they're reading all from the same material to understand the same thing all as one. But no, that's not what we see. People disagree on certain things, and maybe some of that may be human nature, but it is a problem nonetheless. But again, I think we talk about some very interesting things here. I would have liked a chance to go back and forth and challenge you on some of the things that you mentioned. But hopefully, for those who are watching and come back and watch this video, they can see if I've made a good case, if I've stuck to my topic, and if I've accomplished what I came here to do. And I definitely appreciate the time to talk with you and to get my views out. Like I said, it wasn't to convince people otherwise, because it's hard. Very rarely will somebody change their views right in the middle of a conversation. Usually people have to go back and think about these things and read these things. But I can only come from my experience, and likewise for you, you can come from your experience and what you've learned. But like I said, I've had 30 plus years in the game, life experience, just like anybody else, but that is still anecdotal in itself. It's my experience. And therein, I'll identify again that because personal testimony is anecdotal, and because interpretations and readings of different scripture and Bibles, you can come up with a different interpretation, you come up with a different meaning for yourself. Therein lies a huge problem for everybody, especially if these books and teachings are used for people to have some type of enlightenment or look forward to some type of afterlife. So I'll stop there.
Right. Yeah. Now, just to get back to when you said that you wish that about the interpretations and about the Christians with the different denominations, but did you know that the majority of Christians, majority meaning like over 70%, are of the same mindset that slavery, the Bible does not condone slavery, and that Jesus has transcended the laws to love your neighbor as yourself. That one, everybody, the majority are in line with that. So that is why slavery will never, ever be allowed again. Although it's happening now, but it's not by Christians. So at least
I was going to say that is a contradiction, because it is happening now.
This is more important than whether biblical slavery happened, didn't happen. It's more important that in 2023, especially Christians who profess to be followers of Christ, understand the Mark 12 verse 31, so that human beings are all treated equally because they are all created in God's image. So this, on the bright side, like I say, is the majority. I know in other things there's a lot of discrepancies, but yeah, like you said, hopefully we can expand on this, but like in this case, I wanted to focus only Exodus 21 and on the things that people in that conversations we were having had problems with, which was only those two verses. They didn't care about, okay, and they kept bringing up the shellfish. I have the answer to that, but I also didn't want to talk about it today because that is not the, because otherwise the conversation get derailed and it's all over the place. I like to stick to just what we are speaking about and then just ignore everything else. But hopefully people who watch, like you say, we can have a moderator next time, so that they can be more back and forth, if you don't mind to do this.
Yeah, if I can find a night like this where I'm not being bothered, I'd be up to do it again. And hopefully we both accomplish something tonight, and hopefully people can look back on this and saw that we had a discussion, we didn't fight each other. We didn't disrespect or anything like that. So I appreciate the chance you having me on here, and hopefully somebody learns from it.
It's a discussion. Okay. Cheers and namaste. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.